GRC, 3 letters. Easy to say it. Governance, risk, compliance. But honestly, if you talk to all the experts who have gone through the journey of GRC, they'll say it's not that straightforward. Welcome to AI GRC Podcast. My name is Victor Monga. I'm your co-host and the producer of the show. With me today in this virtual studio, my good friend, Edwin Covert. Edwin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this.
So Edwin is pro in GRC, all the compliance topics, and I have asked him today for a 15-minute casual conversation. We talk about governance. That's the first step when you start GRC. So Edwin, let me start by asking you this. When companies start thinking about GRC, they're not mature enough or they're starting to get maturity level. What is the first number one rule that you have to consider or think about? Because governance is going to be applied to the entire company organization. What is that first rule that you would recommend?
First rule is the understanding of the why. Why are we doing this? What is the business rationale or the mission rationale for even having this program? Because if you can't discuss that, or you have no foundation then for the rest of it. Like, governance is going to set the stage.
Right.
It's literally going to describe the rules of the road. How are you going to manage and do the things that you want to get done? If you don't understand what those things actually are, what the end objective is, then you're spinning cycles and killing time. It's a waste.
And that why usually, where do you think that comes from? IT, security, business, compliance?
Business. Every time. I have preached this for longer than I care to remember, think about it, actually. Get security, the world that I inherit or inhabit, or the IT team, they all work for the business. The whole reason is business need. So business needs to tell us what they want done. We can tell them the right way of doing it. We can tell them the best way to get there, the most secure way of solving the problem. But at the end of the day, it's still a business problem that we are trying to solve. The same with the risk,
sure.
Right? The R and the C, right? Risk, cyber is a business risk. It's not an IT risk. IT doesn't own that risk. Business
100%.
owns that risk. Compliance, it's a business issue. Compliance with a business set of requirements, be it, even if it's a security requirement, it's still a business requirement that you have to solve for.
Let me throw a curveball at you, obviously.
Yeah.
You'll handle this well. So let's say
Here's let's find out.
Someone is inheriting a cybersecurity CISO position, let's put it that way, security leader. And in that organization, governance was initiated and operated within the IT realms. And now the person, CISO, wants to expand that to business. So instead of your first example where business should be the one driving or answering that why we need governance, they already have governance, but that's really in the GRC of the cybersecurity compliance IT world. They need to expand that. How do they do it?
How do I basically bring the business in? How do I get them involved, right?
Yes.
So it's a couple different ways I think that you could approach this problem. First and foremost, think about it in terms of sort of what's in it for me. If you're the business side of the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need to be thinking about what's in it for that. So you need to answer that question in advance for them. So for them, it's not, you're going to fail the security audit. Nobody cares. The business doesn't care if they fail. I mean, they care, but they don't really care. What they care about is lost revenue or lost productivity.
100%.
Or lost sales or something that is that they can't get done that is critical to their business, their needs, right? So if you start talking about it in terms of, if you don't solve this problem and we get audited and we fail the audit, what is that going to do to affect the business? Oh, well, it's going to take resources away from your go-to-market campaign because now I have to defer them to the lawyers. It's going to cause us downtime because we're not allowed to operate this system, right? And this system is driving 50% of your sales. Now it's a thing that they understand. It's a language that they speak. We're now speaking business, if you will.
So pretty much back to when you start or whenever you start to include business in the conversation, it's translating that instead of asking that, whatever the cybersecurity terms, now you translate to, hey, if we don't sell it, you like that $1 billion business, I need that $10 million budget. If you take away the budget, you're taking away your business as well. So start translating that.
It is. And this is, I'm going to do a little pitch here for my passion project of the year.
Okay.
Which is cyber risk quantification, right? And this is the ability to speak that business language. So now it is saying there's an actual legitimate business cost to not doing X, Y, and Z. And I can calculate that out. I can say there's a likelihood this thing is going to happen, this bad thing to the asset that you care about, and there's a cost. Well, now I'm comparing costs of solving the problem to costs of not solving the problem. And those are languages that people in the business side of the world speak. They understand. That makes sense to them.
Right.
Now you can have those make conversations in a meaningful way. And there's methodologies to do it. That's the one thing everyone gets hung up on. Oh, it's too hard to quantify cyber. It's not. You just got to ask the right questions and do it consistently. But you can do all that now. And once you've gone down that road and start going down that road, you'll start to see it everywhere. You'll start to see how you quantify and measure and then improve, because you can't improve what you don't measure.
People are going to hate me for this one who are listening, but how do you start that quantification? Because there is qualitative, quantitative, but how do you start that? Because if you start as a security or IT person, you start looking into it, the cost of business, cost of doing business, what that means, and then pretty much like that, mapping that mind map of cost. And then so you can say, if we don't do this 10 million, you will lose this 10 billion. Who's doing that? IT, security, who's doing that?
Well, whoever's in charge of doing the risk assessments, right? If it's a security risk assessment security team, the key though is asking the right questions of the right people and properly scoping it out. You're not going to solve all risks at the same time. Build a scenario, right? Your scenario should be something like, I have this set of assets that are very important to me, and I'm worried about this threat, right? So, putting some words around it. I'm worried about scattered spider.
Okay.
Attacking this database that's got PHI in it, that's critical to our business, public, personal health information. Then you can start asking questions around, okay, well, what happens if that data goes away? What if we can't access that data? How does that affect the business? Well, you ask the business answer. You don't go to the security people and say, what happens if that server goes down? They're not going to care. They don't know, but the business knows, right? The people that run that division should know.
Yeah.
And then so that's sort of the second half of the equation, which is, your loss magnitude, using sort of the FAIR terminology. The front end of that equation is the loss event frequency, and how likely is it going to occur? Well, you can get that data. You can make a calculated estimate of that data. You can either get it from the insurance company, you can get it from sources that will sell you that data, like Advisen.
Right. You can
make some reasonable guesses. There are ways to do it. But now what you end up with is you say, okay, well, I know it's going to cost me, if in this scenario, Scattered Spider attacks this database and encrypts it and the database is no longer available. I can calculate all the costs associated with that. And I can say the likelihood is, let's call it 50%. There's a 50% likelihood based on historical data that this event's going to happen. And if it happens, the loss magnitude of this is $1 million. Just making up easy numbers.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
At 50%, that's essentially a coin flip. Are you willing to flip a coin on that loss? And if you are, great. Then I don't have to do anything. My job here is done. If you're okay with those odds. If you're not, if the business is not okay with those odds, then let's have a conversation about what controls can we put in place to either reduce the magnitude, reduce the loss event frequency, or ideally both, to get it down to a comfortable level. The other thing you have to know is, what's your comfortable level? What level of risk are you comfortable with? And that's not a question that cyber can answer.
Right.
That's a business question. I
100%
don't own the risk. In cyber, I don't care what anybody says. I do not own the cyber risk in business. As a CISO or a cyber leader, what I do is I explain the risk and document it. The business owns that risk. As long as they're comfortable with that risk, cool, I just need to sign this piece of paper that says you're comfortable with it. So.
And that usually is not as simple, where when a CISO is explaining that, I mean, they'll do everything in their power to make sure that they explain the right way. But let's say if the head of the department or head of the business is really disengaged and they're like, we don't want to do anything. We don't want to pay for any of that. Exactly to your point, then sign this piece of paper. Do you think, I was going to say that at that point, it's a resume generated event, right? You just got to go update your resume at that point. And because the minute you put that in front of your CEO or founder, you're sort of done.
Yeah. At that point, the CISO becomes Chief Information Scapegoat Officer.
Yeah. 100%.
Right? And whoever's running the show, that's not an organization that I would want to be part of, because it's an organization that, one, doesn't understand risk in a meaningful way. And two, if they do understand, they don't care.
Yeah. All right. Let me reel back to the governance where we started. So you answered the why. Why do we need governance? What's the first thing we need governance? Now, how do you actually sustain that? Because it's not a one thing that you do it overnight, or it's not a product that you can have an end date. It's something that you reiterate almost every time. how do you operationalize or how do you sustain that governance in an organization? Let's talk about that.
Sure. I think, and this is probably the harder of the two, right? Everyone can start a program. It takes real energy to sort of maintain a program over time. You have to end up doing it with muscle. Think of it as muscle movement, right? You've got to exercise those muscles on a consistent basis. So you set up a cadence and you get support from the executives to continue that cadence. You get them engaged. So, because when everyone sees the boss involved, suddenly it's a little more important. We all know how this works, right? So you get somebody who's going to be your executive sponsor, if you will, and get them actively engaged. I mean, when we were doing this at Warner, we had an active CISO, we had an active deputy CISO. They were engaged, right? And they had direct lines into the CIO, and the business was all in. I mean, it was great. When we were doing it at Bowhead when I was the CISO for the insurance company, again, the CEO and the COO were actively engaged. It was,
Right.
we were making progress. When we did it at Deutsche Bank, my team and I, it wasn't me by any stretch of imagination, it was my team. When we created the enterprise security architecture for the bank, we had to go sell it. We had to go to Frankfurt. We had to go to London. We had to go and show the value of what we were trying to do. And we eventually did, and they incorporated it into the larger enterprise architecture. But we had an effort to make it sustainable, and it just took time and energy and
Right.
consistently doing the work. It's not, you're right, it's not a one and done. It should never be a one and done. Otherwise, you end up with resume generating opportunities.
Let's wrap towards this one. What's the one bad thing that person can do which will set the governance program in a really terrible trajectory, that it's set to fail, it's set to doom? That one thing, don't do it. If you want to start your governance or GRC program, you're trying to include your business, what is one thing that Ed would recommend that don't do it?
These are great questions, all right. So my one thing I would recommend against not doing is don't go in there without understanding the organizational culture. Don't try and form fit your last templated project into a new organization without fully understanding how that organization works. What's the
Right.
culture like? Who are the people? Where's the nodes, if you will, of influence? You've really got to know that, I think, to have a good sense of how the organization operates. And then from there, you can start laying your plans sort of overlaid on top of that organizational understanding.
Fair. I get this question a lot. I'm going to pose that to you as well. How do you keep up with all of this, the information out there? Obviously, you have experience, your own insights, but are there like resources that you, for cybersecurity news or general news, what is one thing that you constantly read or watch almost every day to keep up with all of this, what's out there?
So I have my own RSS server that I have a bunch of subscriptions to that I check every day, and it's just news articles and things coming in. A lot of it is talking to other people in the industry. Managed to get on a bunch of subscription newsletters that are always interesting. I posted this app about NIS, NIS2, right? Coming out of Europe. And that was a rabbit hole that I went down just because I was talking to somebody a week ago. And I was like, oh, I need to look into NIS2. I've been a minute since I've looked at it. I knew it was coming. So it's those sorts of conversations that lead me down other paths. And, it's work.
Yeah.
It's you're constantly, I think my wife looks at me a little funny sometimes, but she's like, what are you reading? I'm like, oh, I'm reading about this resiliency argument that somebody in Zurich's making. And she's like, what the hell?
Like,
No,
why?
Stop.
Yeah.
Go play with the dog. So.
All right. Hey, Edwin, thanks so much for being on the show. How can people connect with you, find you? You mentioned LinkedIn. That a good way
LinkedIn's a great way.
Okay.
As far as I know, I'm still the only Edwin Covert in all of LinkedIn, so I'm easy to find there. EdwinCovert.com is my website, and I've got all my writings and stuff there. So those are probably the two easiest ways.
Thanks for being on the show, and thanks so much.
Absolutely, Vic. Appreciate it.